Okay.
Hello.
Hi. It's Monday, February 10th, and this is Group 5,
Post 5.
Post 5, and do we need to introduce ourselves? I don't know. Anyway, we're going to start off talking about our different ideas that we have for the position paper that's due at the end of the quarter. So, Debbie, why don't you talk about your ideas?
Well, I know like in Bellingham they only have like 12 of like the teachers in the ELL program right now, and there's only 2 at Spolsheim. And so I feel like the debate, like my position letter will probably be centered around like they need more funding for those resources so that they can get more teachers. Because when I interviewed Bethany Johnson, that was like the number one thing that she like consistently was saying is that like they need more and they're not giving them more.
Right.
That's one of the huge issues they're having.
Brian?
I thought about focusing my letter on the need for reaching out for parental involvement with ELLs, and I guess particularly the Latino community. And it was based kind of from our interview with the ELL instructor, and then the articles we read about the cultural differences between parental involvement and and those expectations. And so yeah, I just wanted to. I feel like I want to focus on that and write some kind of letter on how we can maybe
Who would your audience be? Were you
um.
writing to parents or writing to teachers?
I mean,
trying to help them figure
probably
out how
the school. Yeah, the school and teachers. Just to think of ways to bridge that gap and if there's a cultural difference, how do you reach across those lines and make something happen? So yeah, that's what I was thinking.
It's funny. I feel like my ideas, my thought process is kind of like a mix of your 2 ideas. Kind of like because I'm currently working at Chuckson Middle School, and that's kind of the neighborhood I'm focusing on. And so I've been kind of observing the class I'm in, and it's a very diverse class culturally and racially with the students. And then I looked around at the people who are volunteering in the classroom today. There's like a student teacher, 2 Compass the Campus people, and the teacher. We're all Caucasian women.
Right.
And so I was just kind of like, okay, then what other kinds of support do these multicultural students have? And it's like there's all sorts, and yet there's just one type of mentor that I've been noticing all around the school. So I'm trying to decide exactly who my audience would be. Probably like it could be either or. It could be the faculty at the school or the parents, because obviously if these students are multicultural, their parents are also going to be the same. So if I think parental involvement and just getting more kind of mentors for a diverse classroom at Shuckson, at least. Because I've seen around the neighborhood too, and there's a lot of multicultural businesses, and I was looking up ELL tutors in the area as well, and there's a lot of them. So I just think it'd be cool to start bringing that into the classroom. So that's kind of where I'm thinking of going.
Yeah. Joy's been really good about letting me, I work in the intensive English program, IEP, and she's been good about letting me kind of focus on things that are kind of relevant to that. So one thing that always comes up for me, I've taught grammar a lot, so thinking about what's the place of grammar instruction when you're teaching ESL students, because some people say you shouldn't teach them grammar. The best way to learn English is just by hearing it, and there's different ideas about that. And then also, I'm kind of interested in teacher evaluation. Like some people go in and observe you with a checklist, which always makes me feel like you have to teach to the checklist, and so thinking of some alternatives to evaluating teachers that are get away from that a little bit. So those are some things I'm thinking about. Cool.
I haven't totally decided on my topic yet, and I kind of wanted to wait. I have a meeting with the ELL specialist at the school that I'm mapping, and I kind of wanted to wait until I could ask her a few questions before I really specifically decide. But I was kind of thinking about cultural relevancy to assessment tools, like standardized testing and stuff like that.
Mhm.
How it's very cultural biased, and
Yeah.
just maybe trying to figure out how to incorporate that into my letter. I'm not sure who my audience would be. I think it would be probably more towards whoever might be involved in the creation of the tests,
The school
that whole
district,
process.
Federal government.
Or
Yeah.
or administrators or those that
Or,
make the
yeah,
choices too.
OSPI,
and-
you know, yeah.
But I haven't quite specifically nailed down what my topic is going to be, but it's going to be somewhere along those lines.
Yeah, that's an interesting area.
Seems like we all are heading in the right direction.
So then we're supposed to talk about the article about Vygotsky.
Oh my God, Steve.
I realized in reading that how influential he has been in the current trends in teacher ed. Because all that stuff about scaffolding, you know,
Yeah,
it all comes out of him, which I
Mhm.
didn't really realize that.
I've heard like scaffolding and ZPD
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh hey, look, hey, Vygotsky, how's it going, buddy? My
Yeah.
old friend, you know.
Right.
So, who wants to start?
Let's just talk about the learning as a social construct,
Right.
either person to person or person in relation to society. Yes.
I was thinking when I was writing this, it makes a lot of sense. That experience of just speaking with someone else. I wrote somewhere in here, without social interaction, our knowledge and experience exists only in a vacuum. So it's not until you communicate with other people that, when you communicate through our words, we're expressing our ideas, our thoughts, our perceptions, and that's, we take those in and we borrow some, and we add thoughts to our own, and it's through that communication where you start to build up, basic knowledge or in perception.
Mhm.
And, without that, if you think about it, if you think of it as an experiment, someone just growing up amongst, in the woods with no one to bounce ideas off of, and it kind of goes back to the philosophical idea of can you think without words,
Right. I think that's something that she wanted us to think about.
Yeah.
Right. Because that relates to the article about the
Yeah, you
people in the Amazon.
Yeah, their society and perception of the world around them has constructed their language,
Mhm.
which in turn has constructed their society
Right.
and how they perceive the things
Yeah.
around them. And they're all so tightly woven that, like, for instance, their concept of counting 1, 2, many,
Yeah.
that kind of system. They think of 1 as a small amount, 2
Right.
as a large amount,
Right.
and then many, and they can't perform certain cognitive functions
Right.
because they just don't understand the concept of counting.
And they don't care. I mean, they
yeah,
don't want to
and it's not
learn.
important. It's
Yeah.
culturally, it's irrelevant to them in their everyday lives,
Right.
and it's interesting how they kind of learn that and preserve that and
Yeah.
come together to shut out all the outside influences and how
Yeah,
their
right.
language really reflects those attitudes.
Yeah, it seems like there's no abstraction, so they're not interested in thinking about anything or reflecting about something. They're just doing things,
If it's not observable or within my realm of memory, or the collective memory goes back as far as the oldest person living,
Mhm.
how far back they can remember. Anything outside of that doesn't matter. It's outside of your experience. It's not relevant.
Right.
It has no impact whatsoever.
Right.
It really makes you realize just how much of what so many of our core thoughts are just like, we constructed them. I mean, like, you can get really deep in it with, like, time as just being something we made up, or numbers just being something, everything, all language is just, like, a representation, so that was like one of my favorite parts of the article. I just thought that was so interesting because it got me thinking about my own language and like how like different slangs and different like nicknames for things come up. It's all just about how we perceive them.
Well, in this article too, it gives a really extreme example of this, and it's harder to picture that or give that credit to somebody, to a culture who is really close to ours
Mhm.
on the surface. Kind of looks like it's kind of pretty much our culture, but slightly different. It almost, I mean, there's aspects of the Hispanic culture, a lot of the different Asian community cultures, that they have a lot of similar things, so it's harder to see how certain things can be so different.
Mhm.
And that's something I think that we need to remember and think about while we're teaching, is just because they appear that they should know what this culturally representative thing is, they really may not.
Mhm.
Yeah, just like a lot of languages. Like one of my friends is really into language, and she's always sharing this with me. How like there's so many languages that have like no word for this thing that we have, but then we don't have a word for something that they have. And, like
Yeah.
a lot of it's also I think it was like a Turkish word or something like that, but it's like for a feeling or experience. And like that's like they use words to explain those that we don't even really think about. We use other words to describe it. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just language.
Japanese has all these words for things on your face, different parts of your face.
And then
that
like
English doesn't
onomatopoeias, I
have.
know they have a lot
Yeah.
of that too.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to think about how it absolutely shapes your thinking and the way you see the world. So, someone with a different culture, let alone someone of the same culture, just different from you, is going, it shapes everything. And like you're talking about time,
Yeah.
time in itself. You think of this Amazon people, it'd be amazing to test the anxiety that they feel compared to the anxieties, in our culture.
Mhm.
Yeah.
When all they do is experience the present moment
Right.
and what's in front of them.
Right.
We were just talking about before, about all the things we have to do so we
Yeah.
can take a nap and how that just looms over you, and for them, whether it's the way their culture has been built over time and their language is shaped, everything's right in front of them.
Slightly envious thing.
Yeah, no,
We
and
don't
it's
have planners.
yeah, and many people will say it, how we're probably more enlightened and we're more progressive and evolved, but I don't know. That's a kind of a good argument of what kind of life is truly.
Yeah, it's like all in the kind of pursuit of happiness and how you want to live your life. I mean,
Yeah.
And a basic point that came up a lot in that article was about because all these linguists were, disagreeing with each other, but the thing that this guy Everett seemed to be proving was that this language didn't have any. You can't make complex sentences in it. They can't say.
They don't have a
There's no subordinate clauses. The woman who is sitting next to me ate her lunch. You have to say the woman is sitting next to me. She ate her lunch. So just stringing together simple sentences.
She eats her lunch probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Rather than the past tense. That was
But you
another thing
can't
where it's,
subordinate one sentence to another.
Right.
Everything's just like a string of things. Yeah. Which links to not being able to make any abstract statement.
it's funny how like I was like picturing that, and it just seems so weird to me to not have a past tense kind of thing. And yet for them, they're probably like, why do you have something in the past tense when they're just so in the moment? It's just,
Right.
yeah.
And that thing about when an airplane came in, the kids would make models of it. But then after the airplane went
That was
away,
really
they just
interesting.
lost interest in
Yeah.
making a model. Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Nothing really sticks.
What's like they said, they really have no concept of history. Like talking about
Yep.
Jesus Christ and these stories and how they have no emotional connection to it. Because
Right.
Did you meet this person?
Yeah.
Is this person? Well,
Right.
then there's really no relevancy. What an interesting story.
Right. And yeah, right. It was just a story. Whereas the missionary was trying to,
But also having no art. Art represents ideas or concepts or history of some kind.
Right.
Ideas that you want to hold on to and preserve and represent.
Right.
And they don't have that concept. What's the
Right.
point of having these artistic sort
Right.
of expressions? Or,
Would you guys say that you agree with Chomsky or Everett? Because I know that like Everett like studied a lot of Chomsky
Uh-huh.
and like At
Yeah.
first, I think he like pretty much like
Mhm.
lived by it, but then he read more about Sapir. Right?
So yeah,
Is that
right.
how you say it?
So I have
Sapir?
Sapir. That's what I've heard.
Sapir.
But yeah.
And then he was saying like culture is influenced on language because Chomsky just like pretty much blew that out of the water and was
Right.
like, no, like this is prevailing because
Right.
like language is cognitive ability, not like controlled by or shaped by culture. Like
Right,
you guys
because
are dumb.
I said it.
Yeah, and
Well,
I
yeah.
said it. Don't observe it. That's a waste of time.
What really struck me was this article is really interesting because it's about the Amazon people, but it's also about academic culture,
Yeah.
and how these academics just take their opinions about things really serious personally. Like if
They
you
believe
disagree
that.
with me about my linguistic theory, I'm not going to talk to you anymore.
Yeah.
Like that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
That's
it's
okay.
like a National Geographic article or something.
Yeah.
Where it was written with the narrative and
Yeah.
everything and history behind that.
Yeah, it's really well written
Yeah.
article.
And then in the interview, like he said, like the loss of language brings loss of identity and a loss and sense of community, a loss of traditional spirituality and a loss of will to live. It's just like it's true.
Yeah, and then just imagine that, like, that just seems kind of like a quote for a lot of what we've been studying in this course about loss of identity through loss of your language and culture.
Right.
Just like
True.
reading that, like, whoa, okay, there's like a little theme for the class, if you will,
Yeah, and it's hard to dig beneath the surface unless you did extensive research as to what theory is more
Right.
is more right.
Yeah, well, like one guy said that, okay, so there's like 6,000 languages in the world and 5,999 of
Yeah.
them have this, they call it recursion, where you can subordinate is, and we found one language that doesn't have that. Finding one language doesn't really prove that recursion isn't an important thing in languages, It's just kind of interesting to see that there is a language like that.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about looking at linguistics from another perspective.
Well, and like they said, that one case though would nullify the universal. the theory of
right,
universal-
yeah.
Universal grammar, yeah.
Yeah, right.
But
and-
without those good theories of universal grammar, there's so much understanding that came from that.
Right.
Without it, we wouldn't have made a whole lot of progress. It doesn't necessarily mean that theory is to live and die by.
Right.
You know?
Right. But you could, and it's interesting. Like you're talking about the competition of academics.
Yeah.
You can see why the ego or pride would, because Chomsky is like statistically the most cited.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and he's got his little fingers and everything.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and his
He knows he's involved in so many different realms of academia.
Oh, yeah.
and his
Yeah.
magnum opus is this universal grammar.
Yeah, right.
Like that's probably his biggest theory.
Yeah.
And then if someone goes marching down into the Amazon and finds something that will debase his something he spent years on,
Yeah.
you could see why Chomsky would be like, no, because I mean, what's that say? It says all those years, and all, like you said, it's still productive. It still produced a lot of
Right.
things, but at the same time, it's like, oh, maybe you weren't right all that time.
It seems like what happens sometimes is that somebody comes up with a theory which really makes sense, but then they try to make it into this all-encompassing thing where
Like they can
everything
generalize it
fits
for everything.
into it, and then at
Yeah.
a certain point,
Yeah.
It's like they
breaks down.
forget it's a theory, you know? Like, I feel like it's so important to realize, okay, this is a theory, it's not a solid fact, a universal truth, and like, I feel like this is something that a lot of these big scholars have to kind of, like, just relax a little bit, okay?
It's interesting though, because this last quarter I took a linguistics class, and
Right.
the textbook basically presented universal grammar as almost like a fact.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and these researchers, they start with a theory, but their ultimate goal, I think deep down inside in that ego, is to find a universal truth. And
Yeah.
and I mean, what's the point of a theory? if it's not going to point to a universal truth. And so the more momentum it gets behind it, you know, like the universal grammar, and the more it points to, yes, this is universal truth, that's what you're going to want it to be. And then, and then when, you know, Everett tries to disprove it with some pretty good evidence too. It's like that, you know, like that quote said someone dropped the bomb on.
Yeah, threw a bomb in the party.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Right.
It is a very emic perspective.
Yeah, but then that gives academics something else to do, you know, I mean.
Yeah.
Well, can we talk a little bit more about Vygotsky? I mean, just
Oh, yeah.
the kind of his basic approach to education, and we talked about how this is a very social approach.
He was very assertive about it being a social environment,
Yeah.
and I kind of liked how he was saying that, like, since, like, someone can teach you as long as, like, they know more about the subject you want
Yeah.
to know.
The
And, like,
MKP.
they don't have to, they don't have
Yeah.
to be, like,
Right.
a certified person in that
Right.
subject. And so, like, then it was making me think, like, more people, like, especially, like, maybe we should utilize this and, like, have, like maybe in, like, the classroom setting, we could have, like, more students, like, help their, like, English language learners, like, classmates so
Yeah.
that, like, they can be on, like, the same level and, like, they're just, like, building bridges between them, too. And
Which
so,
I think part of that is a good endorsement for bilingual programs because I mean, like Westview in the Burlington School District, you have these English-speaking white kids and these Hispanic kids, and you put them together in one class, and you're learning some class content stuff in Spanish and some in English, but both they're kind of paired up with the opposite language, and they're able to go through these classes together and collaborate and help each other
give
with
and take.
filling the holes. And,
Yeah.
and it definitely, I think, lets them take turns in taking that more knowledgeable other
Yeah,
learner
right,
role, and then
right.
you know the next subject they might do it in English or Spanish. You know, they get to switch and ultimately kind of help teach each other.
Like I remember
That's kinda cool.
something in one of my classes about like we were learning about like what percentage of what you learn by doing what things, and like I think it said like you retain 90% of what you learn by teaching it to
95%,
somebody.
yeah.
That's how
I think
much?
it's 90 or 95%.
Yeah, some really high. I know that. So
10% of what you read versus I think 20% of what you see
Like,
and hear, and then like 95% of what you teach to someone else.
Oh, yeah, well, I know that's true, that the best way to learn something is to teach it, yeah.
like that's like
Figuring out how to explain it to somebody, yeah.
that's like why practicums are so important in the education program. I mean, like we think about like I think about like these scaffolding things and the ZPD and all this
Yeah,
stuff I had to
right.
read about, and then I look at ZPD, you know, and then I think about like when I'm working in a classroom, like, oh yeah, I scaffold this student by doing this, and then I remember what scaffolding is, and then because I've been using it and teaching it, you know.
It's kind of, I've run across this a lot where when you read about scaffolding in a book or something, it's like this abstract thing.
It's a
And then you're
similar-
sitting in a classroom and you realize, oh, that's what I was just doing.
Yeah.
But you don't think of it as,
Very
quote,
intuitive.
scaffolding, you
Yeah, they
know?
put this fancy title on
Yeah.
it, but you're like, it's
Like,
just
oh, they
supporting
make
their
work for
learning,
that.
how much, however much they need it, you know.
Right. It seems like a lot of that idea is just people learn step by step, you know?
Yeah.
You don't learn something all in one time.
Yeah, I kind of like what I was reading about, where it's like, okay, the kids at this developmental level. I'll try saying that 10 times fast. And then there's like the kind of next level that they can get to, and then there's like the space in between. So it seems like that's their ZPD. But
Yeah.
then by scaffolding, it's like helping them like a little scaffold. You like step up and you get
Right.
there.
Right.
So
Yeah.
just like seeing, like I thought like one of the important things I was talking about was like providing that scaffolding and all that support, but only however much they need. So not
Mhm.
overdoing it or underdoing it.
Right.
Like I thought that was really important. Do you guys like one of my question was giving examples of scaffolding. What are some examples that y'all can think of? 'Cause I came up with a few, but I wanted to get your input.
Creating a note-taking guide while you're giving lectures. They have kind of an outline or something they can fill in blanks, or they can and you can construct it so that they're either filling in a word here and there, or they're filling in full sentences, and that would kind of depend on their learner as far as where they're at, how involved, how much they need to be, how much help they need as far as,
Yeah.
that's one form of scaffolding.
I like that.
Something like the writing process.
Mhm.
I mean, brainstorming, and pre-writing and drafting, and creating a final product. You don't just go straight to creating the final product.
Right.
You brainstorm ideas and ways you may organize it, and then while teaching that writing process, you break that down for students. Just showing them a final essay and saying, "Here, write something like this."
Yeah.
It's that's way too far. The ZPD.
Yeah.
And if you can break it down, it makes it far more doable.
Using manipulatives and stuff for math, counting, or doing math problems, that would be a form of scaffolding.
Would driving also be a form of, like, if you're like learning how to drive and like there are certain things that like you already know, like look both ways before crossing the street, or red means stop and green means go. When learning to drive.
Okay, so yeah, like the practical.
Well, you know how in the student driver cars,
Right.
in the passenger
Yeah,
seat,
right.
the teacher has a brake.
That's a very good example of
That's scaffolding.
scaffolding. Yeah, serious.
And
The student forgets where the brake pedal is. You have that support, or else you're
Like
like,
do a hand.
and that's what
Foreplay.
the scaffolding is very intuitive.
Yeah.
Like it's
Sure.
when you read it in a book, you think, oh, am I doing this? Am I doing it? And then it's like, yeah, you are, because
It's
that's
just, like,
the way
comes
you learn.
naturally,
That's
yeah.
the way you talk to someone. If you find out they're a few steps below, you meet them there. And I was coaching a basketball
Right.
team last year, and I came into the team thinking, I was like, all right, I want to run this kind of offense. I want to do these kind of plays. I got to the team, and it's like, oh, we better learn how to dribble.
That's important.
Yeah,
That's
so-
interesting.
And so we ran dribbling drills, because you can't run a damn thing if you can't dribble to it.
Right.
And so, it's really common sense in the learning process, I think. At least I'd like to think it is. I mean, if
Seems
that doesn't
like it.
come somewhat naturally to you, I think you're kind of in the wrong.
Yeah. Well, if you look at babies crawl before they walk. I mean,
Right,
that's sort
yeah.
of scaffolding.
It's the way we learn, and it makes sense that's the way we would.
But it seems like that's a really important point. What you were saying was you have to be able to dribble first. Like you have to start from where you are. And a lot of times people want to be able to do all these things that they're not really at the level to do, you know, and they have to just accept that.
Baby steps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought something else that we were talking about earlier was kind of an example of scaffolding about like putting kids into their groups, like putting like a lot of times in the past they've done it where they put all like the high achieving kids in a group, all the kids who can read really well, and then there's the kids who can't read as well, and they're in a group together. That can work sometimes, but I also think like what we were saying earlier about like mixing the groups a little bit, like such as with the Spanish speaking and the English speaking, you know.
It's
Mhm.
always important to have a variety of
Yeah, go to
groupings.
interview
If you
with
just
Christian.
stick with the
Okay,
same
great.
grouping based off of, you know,
Then you get like the same
skill level criteria,
the
then
same project, the same concept.
the gaps between the two levels are just gonna get bigger. and bigger.
Yeah. So it's like how I was saying that for scaffolding, you just need someone who just knows a little bit more than you. It's like, and we automatically want to jump and say, oh, it's a teacher, or that's a mentor, or something like that. They can just be another student. So I thought that was a cool example I hadn't really thought of before. But
Yeah, I think you can definitely use that to your advantage more, especially taking that theory, the most knowledgeable person, just because they're not a teacher doesn't mean they can't contribute to someone's learning. And peer groups and peer learning, there's different dynamics as far as, their relationship and self-esteem and all that. But if someone take advantage of someone's knowledge and help, have them help others. And I think that's probably something that a lot of teachers don't utilize as much as they probably could. Yeah.
And there's this kind of idea that like, okay, I'm the teacher, I have to teach them everything. But no, it's like, I think students are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for and able to share their knowledge a lot more than we give them credit for. I think we're realizing that now.
Schools are kind of like a reflection of society. So, as a community within a school, you're teaching these kids how to interact with different people, a group of different people, and you should give them a variety of opportunities to practice that. Because as they grow up, they're going to be going out into society and need to use those skills that they learn at this lower school level in the grander scheme of things.
Kind of going off on that, like going out, like having them learn to maybe accept scaffolding from others, you know, and because like once you get out of school, you think you're done learning, but you're really not. So like looking for those people to scaffold you and looking for your mentors in like the real world, you know.
Yeah, because I've thought about it before. Like once you like are officially done with schooling, and like then everything else, like learning is so much more independent. And so like I think that's why it like then that's when like when you do start to learn more things, like it's usually in social environments and just like talking to different people and who have like experienced different things than you have or have like done different things that like they have knowledge of and you have knowledge of separate things and you can collaborate.
Yeah. It's like finding teachers wherever you go, you know. Everyone can be a teacher.
Everyone can be a teacher.
Yeah.
And through all of those little interactions and socializations, you have the underlying cultural lessons.
Yeah. Just
And
Vygotsky's
are part of
all
that.
I know
social.
this sounds kind of lame, but I was watching like this episode of New Girl,
Oh,
and
nice.
she's a teacher, and she was talking about like her first student, and like her best friend was like, "Wait, I was your first student," and then it's like a flashback to when they were younger, and like she did like help like her best friend like get better at like her academics.
That's so cute. I love that. Going back to the whole idea of that kids can be teachers to each other.
Yeah, we can
That's-
help each other out.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Not that I have.
Did we cover mostly the questions?
The only thing I really want to bring up is about like the political figure that was represented in like the Precious Knowledge video, and like how he is like the exact definition of like middle class white male
Oh my
trying
gosh,
to
right?
like resist the melting pot of America that we are, and like he wants to build more barriers rather than build bridges. And
Yeah, even when he was in the classroom, he was like seeing it for himself, right? Like there's that part where he came and observed the class. I always remember that part. It's like it's right there in your face, and like you can see all
yeah,
the good that this classroom is and what the community is, and he's still just like he still has his blinders on.
He talks about being part of the Martin Luther King march and protests and, you know, the movement,
Civil rights,
but
yeah.
then
Oh, yeah, he totally believes in that.
but then like 2 seconds later he's like, and you can see by the rudeness happening behind me what they're teaching in that
Yeah,
classroom.
exactly.
These rude people behind me, they're exercising their right to protest or, you know, whatever, something that they think is unjust and unfair. And
they
it
just
and
gave
it
him
just
a microphone.
cracked me
Yeah.
up how he
Yeah, really.
he opens up with how much he wants human rights and equality, and he was part of the Martin Luther King movement, and then turning around and saying, "Oh, look what they're teaching them. They're teaching them rudeness, and then, you know, it's a bad program."
so ironic. I know. It's like, I just find it like it's sad, but it's also just laughable, you know.
But it's
Well, yeah.
but it's there. It's true, and it seems to be more of a majority attitude than.
Yeah, and by giving him a microphone and letting him talk in front of all these people, it's only transmitting that message that he has to like everyone else who can hear him, whether like they disagree or not. Like they're still being fed this information, and some people actually do take what he says seriously
Yeah,
and
'cause
believe
he
it.
has a microphone, so that makes him important.
Yeah, exactly, and a suit and
Oh yeah.
Caucasian.
Oh.
It's
There you
harder.
go.
It's harder to convince the masses of positive things that are true than negative things that are not true.
Yeah.
It's like once they get those negative seeds in their head, it takes forever to wipe them out. Whereas they hear something positive, and it takes them a while to warm up to the idea, and then see evidence, and then finally accept it as maybe you're right, maybe it is a good thing. Whereas like the negative BS people just eat right up.
Mm-hmm. It seems like it's easier to be negative.
Well, and to a great majority there, it's not negative, so it's,
They think it's fighting for a positive,
yeah,
but really it's
it's
negative.
it's just all depending on.
Maybe we're
how you
wrong.
look at it.
Hey, never know.
His
Obviously
whole,
we're not.
his
Oh
whole
gosh, yeah,
idea,
'cause
he
I
tried
absolutely-
to base his whole stance on they were segregating rather than he wants everyone to come together.
But as it said in the opening, everyone's open and okay to take this course. You don't have to be somebody with a, you know,
Yeah,
Hispanic
no,
Yeah.
he
heritage. You don't have to
completely
be, you know, an African
disregards
American or
all-
whatever to
Yeah.
just participate. It's open for all.
It's not like you have to enroll, like you have to like register and be selected, you know?
And I really like that because because you saw that there were also like white kids in
Yeah.
our class and
Oh,
they were
yeah.
learning like Mexican literature, and so it's like by them showing that they support like their culture, then I feel like it gives them more like motivation to then like want to read like English or like American literature,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, they're like, okay, they're accepting us, so we
yeah,
can also be
But-
cool with them, you know?
So, but you can see the threat
Yeah.
to him and
It's
those
close.
people though, right? Yeah, because it's like, oh wait, Mexican culture is gonna start infiltrate this mainstream culture. Mexican, what? They're learning about Mexican
Yeah.
lit?
But they
What?
don't
They're
only
gonna
have
start
to
to
do
get a
Mexican
voice?
lit. We
What?
can do
They're going
African
to.
lit.
Well, I know, yeah, ideally we can, but it's like, whoa, so all our kids are gonna grow up multicultural?
Mhm.
This has got to stop.
This has got to stop. Yeah.
So I mean, you can see it's, you know, we don't agree with it,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of people don't, but many people do.
Yeah.
You can see that fear of whoa, where's our country going?
Yeah, there's no, like, we always seem to kind of take comfort in the us versus them, but then this is just creating an us, so we don't have, yeah. I don't know where I'm really going with that, but
I took an African sci-fi class last quarter.
African sci-fi.
Such a thing
What?
exists.
That's
It
so
was
cool.
it was
Such a thing
great.
exists.
It was
Such a
great.
thing exists, like,
But it like taught you like the correlation between like our history, like American history of like colonialism and like going to Africa, taking these people, bringing them back to like somewhere else and like conforming them into like what we want, and then like kind of bridging that between like sci-fi and like how there's, I know that sounds really weird.
no, this sounds really
And,
cool.
like aliens, like essentially like colonialism is almost like
Alien
aliens taking
abduction?
over. Yeah, exactly. And they like want to conform like into their society, and it's so weird. But
What?
it's a really interesting class.
Sounds fascinating.
We could teach that in school too.
Hey.
Well, on that note,
Yeah.
Aliens, eh?
Yeah.
Well,
live
see you
long
later.
and prosper, you know.
Tom had to duck out of here for an interview for his asset mapping
Good
mapping
thing.
project. Yeah, so that's why he took off. But yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thank
Bye. See you next week.
Live long and prosper.
you.